The revolution will not be televised. It'll be streamed right into the palm of your hand. That revolution, of course, is the AI and machine learning revolution that seemed to be set off by the introduction of ChatGPT in late 2022. I'm Levi, and I'm going to show you how you can be sure that your classic Commodore, aging Apple, more mature Mac, and nearly all retro computers with a terminal program aren't left behind. You might have played around with the chatbot called ChatGPT. That was developed by a company called OpenAI, and anyone can access it from their website using a modern web browser. But if you're like me, you aren't always using a modern web browser. So what's the deal? Why is OpenAI limiting access to its most popular chatbot to users with modern web browsers? Well, I asked OpenAI's chatbot ChatGPT to explain. Here's what it said. I actually asked it to write me a YouTube vlogger script explaining why vintage computers can't access this particular page. And it responded by saying, "Hi everyone, today we're going to be talking about why vintage computers can't access certain websites that require HTTPS encryption. First, let's go over what HTTPS is. It stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure, and it's a protocol used to securely transmit data over the internet. The S in HTTPS stands for secure, and it means that the data being transmitted is encrypted. So even if someone were to intercept the transmission, they wouldn't be able to read the data. Of course, we can see why this would be useful for all sorts of things like banking and email and everything that we want to keep away from prying eyes. Now, why can't vintage computers access a page that requires HTTPS? Well, the chatbot explains the answer lies in the technology used to encrypt the data. Modern encryption methods such as TLS and SSL use algorithms that require a lot of processing power. These algorithms are designed to keep our data secure and protected, but they require modern computer processors that can handle the load. Vintage computers, on the other hand, simply don't have the processing power to handle these encryption methods. Another reason is that older computers often lack the security features that are required to securely connect to a website using HTTPS. For example, they might be running, they say outdated versions or classic versions of web browsers that don't support modern encryption methods, or they may not have a web browser at all. Skipping down, I'll say in short that vintage computers can't access pages that require HTTPS. They don't have the processing power, the security features, and sometimes even the software to do it. It's important to remember that the internet and technology are constantly evolving, and it's essential to keep our devices and software up to date. Well, the software on our vintage computers can be left in a classically vintage state. But anyway, thanks for watching. If you like this, no, we're not done. We're not going to hit the like and subscribe button. Let's forget that. So I'm going to show you how you can use, in my case, an Apple IIgs to access ChatGPT, actually OpenAI's other chatbots, because ChatGPT itself, as of today, February 10th, 2022, is not available anywhere except this website, chat.openai.com/chat. But fear not, OpenAI has several other language learning models that they have released APIs for, which allow us to get command line access and text-based access without a web page and without the security of HTTPS by using that API through a Raspberry Pi computer. So stay with me. I'm going to show you how to take a Raspberry Pi, configure it as an intermediary for your 8-bit or 16-bit retro computer, and have a little chat with a chatbot from OpenAI, and maybe even lay the groundwork for future access to ChatGPT, which may be coming. So right now, ChatGPT itself, which is probably the best model that OpenAI has, isn't available by API, but supposedly that's coming. So if you take a look at their website here, if we go to the overview, it says ChatGPT is coming to our API soon. Sign up to stay updated. I've signed myself up, so I'll get an email when that happens. But there's other models that we can use in the meantime that are almost as good, and you can still have fun with a classic computer. First things first, we are going to set up a Raspberry Pi image. So what you're going to need is the Raspberry Pi Imager, which can be downloaded from RaspberryPi.com. You're just going to open it up on your computer, choose the OS, which is the Raspberry Pi OS. Choose your storage device. I've already written this card, but if you have a SD card in your reader, you'll see that as a choice here. So pick your SD card. Be careful not to pick a drive that you don't want the data overwritten on. And then before you go ahead and write it, why don't you click on this button down here, this gear icon. It's going to ask you, would you like to pre-fill the Wi-Fi password for your system? If the computer that you're creating this SD card on is on the same Wi-Fi network that the Raspberry Pi will be on, which it probably is, then you can say yes if you're running a Mac, and you'll just go ahead and enter your credentials. I would set the host name as something like RetroBridge or something that will be set it apart from the other Raspberry Pis that you might have on your home network. So let's go RetroBridge. You'll definitely want to enable SSH. Use password authentication for now. Set your username and password. I'm just going to leave it as the default Pi and use a password that I can easily remember. And then you'll see it brought over the name of my Wi-Fi network and the pre-shared key for the Wi-Fi network. So make sure that that's checked so that your Pi will automatically connect to your home Wi-Fi. And then what we need to do is, this is a little bit funky, this thing, this selector. I don't love it. And US is all the way down here at the end, but nonetheless we can get that set. Set your locale settings. I'm gonna leave it the way it's set because that's where I am in the Pacific time zone. Everything else looks good. Hit save, press right, and let it do its thing for a few minutes, and I'll be back. And we're just gonna make sure that our Raspberry Pi is off. Pull out a card that's in there and put the card that we just created in here and turn it back on. Now it should boot, and if we've done it correctly, it should automatically connect to our Wi-Fi network. Okay, so assuming everything went accordingly, your Raspberry Pi computer is booting from the micro SD card that you just created, and you're going to connect to it using an SSH command inside the Mac terminal. Now, if you're using a Mac, you can just go Command Space in Spotlight, type in terminal, open up the terminal app, and you'll get this window. If you have a Windows computer running on a PC, then you might need to use a program like Putty to create an SSH session. But in the end, you're just looking to create a command line SSH connection to the Raspberry Pi, which you've enabled SSH in the Raspberry Pi imager when you created that card, so the SSH service should be running on it. So from the command line, type SSH space pi at retrobridge.local, assuming that's the host name that you gave your Raspberry Pi when you set it up. And the first time you connect, you should see this message that says the fingerprint give you a string here. Are you sure you want to connect using this fingerprint? You can say yes, it's safe to do so. Enter the password that you gave it in the Raspberry Pi imager, and here you are at the command line in the home directory of your RetroBridge Raspberry Pi. Now, what we need to do next is, first things first, install Telnet. Now, we learned a little bit from ChatGPT why a retro computer can't connect to a website using HTTPS. Well, SSH is also a secure protocol, so we're not going to be able to use my Apple IIgs to connect to the Raspberry Pi using SSH. Even though it's text-based, it is encrypted, and the IIgs isn't capable of making that text-based connection using encryption. But fear not, there is an alternative to SSH. It's a few years old. Some of you may have used it before. It's called Telnet. And Telnet is an unencrypted text-based terminal connection from computer to computer. It's basically what everybody used before security became the first priority online, and it's a clear text, a plain text based way of connecting from computer to computer. Now the thing is that most modern computers don't have Telnet installed on them by default. So what we'll need to do is install the Telnet server on the Raspberry Pi. Now, it took a bit of searching, but I did find a website that explained how to do this. And if this site isn't still on, at least we can preserve some of their instructions here. And I'll try to paste some of this into the description on the video below as well. But the first thing you'll want to do is run an update to the APT package manager. So you might have to do it as a super user. Let's try that. Yes, type sudo apt update -y and just let it run. Now, the reason we do this update is to make sure that we have the current version of all the packages. If you've just installed your OS, then chances are it's not going to need to do a whole lot. But if you're using a Raspberry Pi or other OS version that's been sitting around for a while, there may be some updates that it needs to do here. Okay, we know we've got the current versions of everything, so we'll just copy paste this, and I am going to put in a sudo, which basically tells it run this as a super user or as the administrator rather than just a user. It eliminates the chance of any errors, and since this is our Raspberry Pi, there's no reason not to do it that way. Okay, it's done installing telnetd, which is the telnet server. Now, what they're telling us is that they want to verify, that we have telnet installed. Now that we know telnet is installed, let's open a new terminal window, and we are going to try to telnet into RetroBridge.local. So just to get an understanding of it, on the left side, we have an SSH session with our Raspberry Pi, and on the right side, we're going to get a telnet connection going and making sure that that's working. Okay, it says telnet connect to address, connection refused, but what it did was it looked up the IP address and it was able to work. Now, I've seen this happen a couple times. It doesn't seem to happen when I connect from my Retro computer, but sometimes when you connect for the first time on the Mac, it gives you a password, but it doesn't give you a username. And Telnet typically wants your username and your password entered in order to log in, and it doesn't accept it in the same way with the @ symbol like we did with SSH. So I just hit enter, let it reject the password, and the next time it comes up, it's going to give me login. The username is Pi. Put in my password. It's a little bit slower than SSH, but it looks like it worked. Okay, perfect. So now we know that we can access this Raspberry Pi computer with a unencrypted connection as well as an encrypted connection. And that's what we're going to use from our Retro computer in order to get in. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is actually install the Python script so that we can interact with the chatbot over a text-based command line interface. Now this website here, Tom's Hardware, he does a write-up that explains a little bit how to run a chat. He calls it ChatGPT on a Raspberry Pi or PC. Now, this was published 18 days ago, so sometime in late January 2022. As of that time, there is no ChatGPT version of the API, so this is a little bit of a mistake in the headline here. But everything else is actually pretty good, and a couple people in the comments down at the end give Tom a hard time, saying that this is just plain wrong. It's not released. The model suggested is DaVinci 003. It's a GPT-3 model where ChatGPT is a separate GPT 3.5 model. It's a technicality. The chatbot that you're going to get by using the DaVinci 003 model is a little bit different. It's not quite as smart as the ChatGPT, but it's really quite good, and I don't doubt that maybe even by the time you're watching this, there'll be an API to get to the ChatGPT 3.5 model. So you're laying the groundwork here. I say forge ahead, do this work, and then when new APIs come out, you'll be all set to get your vintage computer connected as well. So what you're going to do next is follow these instructions. What you want to do is, if you go to this website here, and again, I'll put that in the link, you can copy and paste these directly into your command line, which makes things a little bit easier than hand typing them from your vintage terminal. So we know that Telnet's working. I'm just going to close Telnet because it's a little bit slower. I'm going to hit exit and just close out of the Telnet session, since really we just set it up to test it. And I am going to issue these commands directly in the SSH session. So the first thing that Tom's hardware tells us to do is update APT again and upgrade it. So, you know what, we'll go ahead and do that. Even though we just did half of that before, we'll follow those instructions to the T, so we're sure that it works. So I'll fast forward here. I've heard people say apt, I've heard people say apt, apt-get, whatever you call it. I'm just noticing now that my video is flipped. So how do I change that? Here we go. Mirror video. And that's what I really look like. I'm going to flip it. Why not? It's not too late. Yeah, now you're not getting a mirror image of me. You're getting, well, not what I see, because I see a mirror image when I look at myself, but you're getting what you'd see if you were sitting across from me at my desk here. That is finished. We can install this little script called OpenAI. Okay, and then it tells us that we need to set a path where the Raspberry Pi OS and Python can look for executables and configuration files. So let's just do that, and we'll head all the way to the end of this document where we will add this line. And we'll just paste that in. Control X, and then yes to save. Done. Save the file and reload to finish the configuration. Okay, we can close the terminal. Scrolling down on the page, you'll see that Tom's hardware suggests that we go through and use a integrated development environment called Fani and copy and paste some code in. I'm going to make that a whole lot simpler for you. We're going to leave this page now and just go over to our command line interface on the Raspberry Pi, and we're going to paste in this line from the description in the YouTube video here, which pulls a modified version of that Python script right from my website and puts it on your Raspberry Pi's disk. Okay, it's done. Whoop, hold on, rookie mistake. I noticed this when I was putting the video together, that I left out one crucial thing. So after you download this file from my server and you've got it on your Raspberry Pi, you actually need to add in that API key that you got from the OpenAI website. So go in, type nano chatbot.py and paste in your API key right here between the quotes. If you don't do this, it won't work at all. You'll get error messages and you'll have problems. So don't forget to add your API key here. When you're done, you can press Control O to write and then Control X, and now you're good. Now what we can do is type Python 3 and execute that chatbot script. Chatbot. So I can say something to it now. let's ask it a question like, what is the oldest computer that has ever connected to the OpenAI system? The oldest computer that has ever connected to the OpenAI system is an IBM System 360 Model 30 from the 1960s. Okay, well, I don't know if I can beat that, but let's go over to the Apple IIgs and see if we can make this happen from there. So the first thing that I'm going to show you here is that I've gone ahead and installed something called Ethernet 2. It's a Ethernet card that works with the Apple IIgs. Now there are other ways to do this. If you've got a terminal connection program and you can emulate Telnet, then you can do this through a serial connection like a Wii modem. Basically any retro computer that lets you connect to a Telnet server will allow you to do exactly what I'm about to show you here. So we're going to use the Ethernet. I have tried it with the Wii modem. I find that to be a little bit trickier to get right with the baud rates and whatnot. So for the ease of the demonstration, I'm going to use a program called Spectrum, which is actually a terminal program that's still in development for the Apple IIgs. Now you could use ProTerm and you could use the serial connection on the Wii modem as well if you had an Apple IIc or something like that. But really we just need something that can get us onto Telnet and make a connection to a remote server using the Telnet protocol. So Spectrum brings you here into this screen that looks like, okay, what do I do next? And pressing buttons doesn't do anything. Open Apple or Command E will bring you to the GUI, and we are going to make sure that we're connected to TCP/IP, which we are in this case. And now we will go to Services. We're going to create a new service. We'll call it RetroBridge. You can call it whatever you want. Now, here's a little tricky thing. You do need to figure out what the IP address is of your Raspberry Pi. So you might need to go into your router to find that. It doesn't seem to like to use DNS resolve for local DNS lookups, but I happen to know that my Raspberry Pi is at 181. Now the online display we're going to set to ANSI. And after connection to run the script, we'll leave that blank. So we'll save that. And we'll see that we now have, in addition to all these retro BBSs, we have RetroBridge as the very last thing. Now I have connect messages turned on, switch messages turned on, and the Telnet button checked here at the bottom. Now we'll log in. It's going to flip us back. We've got a login prompt, so that's promising. And here we go. Now, same command. Oh, before I do that, let me show you something. I'm hitting the backspace button. Nothing's happening. I can't correct my errors. Uh-oh. All right. It doesn't like that command not found. One thing you want to do is type term equals ANSI. Now, if I make a mistake and I press the backspace button, that works correctly, but more importantly, interfaces like Nano, which require full screen drawing, sort of this character mode that draws all over the screen for you, allows you to move dynamically around, those will all work correctly as well too. So it's important to do that ANSI when you log in order to make that happen. And plus your control commands will work as well. Save the buffer, no, okay. So Python 3 chatbot.py, and there's the chatbot prompt. Hey there, I am typing this to you on an Apple IIgs. Let's see what he says. Wow, that's awesome. I've never seen an Apple IIgs before. What kind of things can you do with it? Well, I can actually go online. Mine. Yes, you can. Many modern printers are connected to the internet. Okay, so sometimes it gets a little nonsensical, and it's not quite as good as ChatGPT, as it can be a little bit nonsensical, and its logic isn't quite as good. But like I said, I think we're just maybe a few weeks or months away from having access to the full ChatGPT model here, and so I'm imagining it's just going to be an update to some of the Python code, and we'll be able to have access to the latest and greatest. But until then, have some fun with this DaVinci model. It's nearly as good, and you can wow your friends. It's a whole lot more intuitive than the old Eliza armchair therapist that we used to play with. So maybe on another video I'll show you some more things that you can do with Terminal. I've been working on trying to get Alpine, which is a text-based mail reader, working. I've gotten it kind of working. I've read some messages, but it doesn't, not quite where I want it to be yet before I share it. So as soon as we figure out all the details, maybe we can put together a video and show you some other things that you can do with your RetroBridge Raspberry Pi, and get your Apple II, your Commodore, any 8-bit or 16-bit computer that has terminal access online in the modern world. One more thing I wanted to show you before I went. The easiest way to exit the chatbot, if you want to go back to the command line, is Control-C, and it says ending ChatGPT. Now, I'm going to actually probably change this in the version that you get when you download it from my site, but they're calling it ChatGPT. It's an error from Tom's Hardware site there, where they were calling it that. It's really not technically ChatGPT. It's OpenAI's DaVinci model. So maybe I'll call it OpenAI instead. So you may see something slightly different there. But hopefully sooner than later you'll be able to actually access ChatGPT the same way. So that's all I have for this time. Look for some future videos along the same lines.